Okay, everybody, this is Sheets, and I'm going to be doing my first, I guess, solo video for DFS for Bobby. Bobby is, I know, going to Monday Night Football, and usually I would do it with him, but I said, you know what, if you wouldn't mind, I'll put it up there, and if nobody likes it or nobody gets anything out of it, then we'll apologize. But I think that people will learn something, and if worse comes to worse, if this never gets put up there, it's just going to be me talking to myself, learning from myself, which I do pretty well also. What I want to focus in on today with this slate review is not so much a game by game, although I will highlight plays, but I will talk about how I like to think about DFS lineups, with specifically GPP builds, and how I build those lineups in an attempt to get some low owned and a decent amount of good correlation. And the correlation aspect in the NBA is something that I think needs a little bit of discussion, because I think it's not well settled how much you should be correlating your lineups. When it comes to DFS, certain sports take on certain different, certain characteristics. Like, for example, baseball, at this point in the DFS research food chain, it has been pretty well proven that you're not going to win unless you stack baseball. Right? Unless you stack lineups for obvious reasons. But forget the obvious reasons or not, the math has been done, and that's just the bottom line. When it comes to football, well, we'll get back to football in a second. When it comes to hockey, likewise, it's just been kind of figured out that you're not going to win, you're not going to have good high GPP scores unless you stack your lines in hockey. And it's still up for debate how aggressively you should stack them, but you should be stacking them. With football, it's okay, there are some aspects that still, in my opinion, are debated, such as running backs, whether you should pair them with defenses and things like that. But I think that it's pretty well clear at this point in the research that if you're not pairing your wide receivers with a quarterback or something like that, whether it be double stacking and bringing somebody back, you're just kind of lighting money on fire. So at least at some degree, there has to be some correlation in NFL with the receivers and the quarterback. That's pretty well settled as well. But NBA, it doesn't seem as though it's been well settled with respect to what is required to make high-performing GPP lineups. You'll ask, I think, 20 different experts, and you'll get a mixture of answers, whether you should be game stacking, whether correlation between players on the same team is that relevant, whether you need a lot of bring back players from the other team to make your lineups, the type of ceiling that you want. And rather than me spend hundreds and hundreds of hours trying to prove or disprove the need for these highly correlated game stacks, I'm going to go with my gut in that if it's not been decided yet, and there are so many hundreds of experts trying to debate this and figure this out, then the answer is probably that it doesn't make that big of a difference one way or another. In other words, you can get away with game stacking, you can get away with not game stacking, within certain reasons. I'm sure nobody wants to play, 8 guys from the same team if we were allowed to do that. But I think that it's, in some respects, the debate is over in that since it has been undecided, that there's no real big advantage one way or the other. Now, with that said, I like making highly correlated lineups. I like having game stacks. And my reasons for that is, again, my background, forget the poker part of it, is, I've been managing portfolios for a long time, and I think about this stuff a lot. And when it comes to DFS and when it comes to the NBA, I do think that having that game stack is really important. And I can't back this up mathematically, but first of all, it just seems logical to me that when you get one team just really just cranking up the pace, the other team just really has to crank it up to keep up. And that in and of itself just brings everybody's ceiling moving in the same direction. Now, cuts the other way too. Like if one team really starts to shut it down, the other team naturally shuts it down too. And so everybody just kind of fails, but that's fine too. The way in GPP lineups, you wouldn't mind sacrificing some failures for some big successes. And the other part that I think people are underestimating is that overtime vig. When you're playing these players from in games that are more likely to go to overtime than others, that extra 5 minutes, whether it only happens 5 or 6% of the time, is so huge. I mean, if you get, I mean, even just two players from each team, you get two closers from each team that you know are going to play the overtime, and it gets to overtime. That's what, that's 20 minutes, right? That's 20 extra minutes of usage. And if you think about it, the usage in overtime becomes even more condensed because, you know, you take Damian Lillard or LeBron, well, not so much this year, but guys that really just can take over if they feel like it. When they get into overtime, they're going to have the ball every single possession, and they're going to probably shoot it almost every possession. So if you can get overtime with a few people who are going to be playing that overtime, I mean, I just think that if you want to beat thousands and thousands and thousands of people, I think that you want to try to get that within reason. That's just my opinion. And since no one's proven me completely incorrect, I'm going to presume that it's at least not the worst idea in the world. So when you see me build lineups, you are going to see me kind of err towards that type of build. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to go through FanDuel. And just because we've done DK the last couple of times, I am going to go through DK next, but I'm going to start with FanDuel and show you how I kind of just start with plays, and then I kind of build into hopefully into a correlated lineup, depending on what options there are out there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually show you the stuff I register for and how I differentiate and things like that. So today, I don't want to get too into every single play, but there are a couple of plays, especially on FanDuel, that kind of stand out just from a value perspective. And you'll find when you do this a lot, that FanDuel does lend itself to having, I don't want to say lock plays, but plays that really have, big value that is tough to fade because you do not have multi-position eligibility. When you have to have two power forwards, for example, you will invariably get one power forward that is really, really cheap that FanDuel drops the ball on. It is just a lock. Now, I say lock, it doesn't mean you can't fade him, really, but like mathematically, he's like almost a lock from a value perspective to at least reach value. And you'll see when you play FanDuel enough that they don't, they are more than happy to give you a couple of $3,800 power forwards or even $4,000 point guards that are taking on big roles without adjusting the price tag. And it's important to kind of start building your lineups, at least thinking of what those things are. So what I'm going to be doing, I want to build a lineup, and the first guy I want to put in today is this might not even be a guy that's really any good, but for today, but like for now, he happens to be popping as a really, really big value. He may not. He's showing a very, very high minutes projection on a couple of sites, and I actually think it's probably going to come down. But let's just presume it won't for a minute. Guy that's popping as a really, really big value on the slate is Omari Spellman, okay, from Oklahoma City. From Golden State. I mean, you go through all the reasons. I mean, Draymond's presumed to be out. And again, if Draymond plays, never mind, right? But he's projected here for 20, 25 minutes, and if that's the case, he's really just insane value at 3,700. So again, I might not even end up playing him at the end of the day, okay? But just to show you kind of how I build it, as of now, this is the first guy I would kind of put in. And then what I'll do is I want to go to the point guard position next because it has two guys that, at least in the projections I'm looking at, kind of stand out as good values. And those are going to be Trae Young and let's put him in Trae Young and Brad Wanamaker. Okay. Now we're not talking about ownership yet, okay? Because we will. And these next two guys I'm putting in are just two of the chalkiest plays on the slate, given the ownership projections as I see them now. I mean, we can talk about all the reasons why these are good plays, but they are rated as really, really good values for all the reasons that make them good plays. Brad Wanamaker, we could talk about whether he's that kind of ceiling type play that you want, but for now, we're going to put him in there, all right? Now, as I go through each position, like I look at shooting guard, and shooting guard, there's nobody that emerges as like a real knockout value, so I kind of not going to plug anybody in there yet. small forward, Giannis is showing us, a really, really good value and really, really good, raw points. So he's probably going to be someone we're going to want to get in, but we're not going to put him in quite yet. The next position I want to look at is going to be the center position, because the center position is, you'll find when we get to DraftKings, it's much different, but on FanDuel, there are 4 different ways that you can go. Well, actually 3, and I'm actually going to go 4th. You could either go really, really cheap, or you could spend up, or you can kind of go upper mid-range. And I'm going to suggest kind of an alternative. And all 4 of these guys project pretty well, but I just want to go over them. I mean, if you wanted to spend up, you could spend up for Andre Drummond. I mean, he does project pretty well. He's got cake matchup, obviously, against Orlando without Vooch. And again, I don't want to double count. He projects well because he has a cake matchup. So you can't say, boy, he projects well and he has a cake matchup. It doesn't work that way. You could certainly pay up for Andre Drummond. The other thing that a lot of people are going to do, which certainly makes sense, is pay down for Jakob Poeltl. He's been starting and he's been 3,900 and they haven't really adjusted for him. And he's popping in a lot of people's optimals and a lot of people's projection models. And I think that's a perfectly reasonable way to go. I mean, you could certainly, go this route. Now, what I neglected to discuss was the ownership of all these guys, right? So if I go to my ownership projections, again, I look at a lot of different ones, but hang on a minute. I mean, you'll see that Andre Drummond's, he's not going to be that highly owned, but he's going to get some ownership. They have him maybe about 10, 12%. Poeltl, I mean, he's got to be really popular. They're showing him only like 12% here, but he's going to end up being really popular. But I want to talk about the other 2 ways that I think you could go on this slate. I'm looking at Wendell Carter Jr. is popular and Embiid, but those guys aren't really popping too well, at least what I'm looking at. The 2 other ways that you could go is, one way is to go Hassan Whiteside. Now, Hassan Whiteside, when we get to it, you'll see that he is going to be extremely popular on DraftKings because he's going to be only 6,000 there. So he's going to be a zillion% owned there. And I do think that sometimes ownership kind of trickles over to the other sites. That if someone like plugs Hassan Whiteside into all their lineups into DraftKings, it's going to be only natural for them to want to, translate that over, even though it's 8,100. So I do think that by definition, he's going to be a little more highly owned than maybe he should be on DraftKings. Yet still, he is projecting really well, and he is projecting as a really good value. And I think that a lot of people are going to go that route too. The one place that I don't think anybody is going to go is kind of like that upper mid-range and that upper cheap value. That when you don't get up to 8,000, but you don't go all the way down to Poeltl. And the guy I'm looking at here is going to be Steven Adams. Okay, and he projects really well. He projects just very similarly value-wise to all of those other guys that I talked about, but he's going to be, I have to say, incredibly low-owned. Okay, so the reason why I'm putting these guys in is just to kind of show you how my builds kind of stem from these kind of decisions. So if I'm going to decide that Steven Adams is the way I'm going to go, right? He's going to be my real low-owned guy to kind of get this lineup going, right? Because Trey's going to be popular, Wanamaker's going to be popular. If, in fact, Spellman does project for what I'm looking at him projecting for, he's going to end up being popular. He just is, okay? So when you start with Steven Adams, then you can go back to these other positions where it was kind of close between different guys, and you can see if you could build your lineups given these decisions that you made. So the first thing that I would do, I would say go back, because I see that we're going to be able to get some guys in here, is I'm going to see if we could pay up for Giannis without, creating too much aggravation. I mean, he is probably the best projected guy on the whole slate, and if we can get him in, that's great. And so when I put him in here, we still have $6,100 per player. So I'm pretty sure we're going to be able to make pretty decent lineups with what we have left. So what I'll do is I'll go back to these other positions and see what projects well, and then I'll see, well, what if those guys that project well also fit in with my idea of making highly correlated lineups? So when I go into the shooting guard position, one guy that actually does project really well, all right, and you'll see he kind of fits in with this kind of build from a correlation perspective, is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He's showing to be probably, I think he's going to be somewhat popular, but I don't think he's going to be crazy popular. He projects pretty well. He's not really that ceiling type of guy, and recently at least. So I don't know if he's going to provide enough upside to win the tournament, but certainly from a correlation perspective, since we already have Spellman and from the Golden State side and OKC and Adams from OKC, we could put Shai in and make it kind of work. Okay. All right, so let's see what else we can come up with. Let's go to small forward for a second. So small forward, what I'm looking at is there are a few guys here which all kind of look the same. Now, you could rank these guys in whatever order you want, rank them by point per dollar or other value measures. But, I mean, you could play Jaylen Brown. Like, Jaylen Brown projects really well. You could actually play Danilo Gallinari, right? So if you could play Danilo Gallinari, now you will have a three-man stack from this game where you could play Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Steven Adams. But what I worry about is when it comes to over-correlating is whether I want two guys that are going to want to get some shots off in that same lineup, right? So I don't know if Shai and Danilo are going to be the right mix. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad mix, so it certainly is definitely possible. Other guys I looked at was Glenn Robinson. He's another guy from this Golden State game who would be a good small forward option. But a guy who's going to project even better than that from a value perspective, is a guy who's been doing really, really well, is going to be Alex Burks. So again, I could go with, I mean, there's Taurean Prince in this position. There's, you can go down you can go to Jonathan Isaac if you wanted to go that route. But all these guys under Giannis, from a value perspective, are looking very similar. So if you have options that look similar, my view is that you may as well pick the option that correlates the best with the rest of your lineup, right? So what I have here now is, I didn't even think about what I was going to do as I was going into this slate, is just because I made that Steven Adams decision, now the rest of this lineup is filling in with all these dudes, right? So what we have left is a shooting guard and a power forward. And what I like to do, and I don't want to do this in the screen because I don't want to show like the different sites that I'm using to look at projections, but I'm looking at all the sites that everybody looks at, is I sort basically by all players, and I can see I need 11,600. What combination of shooting guard and small and power forward is going to get me at least close, so that I could just and get me good value? And boy, there's a couple of different things I can do here. Well, one thing I could do. This was not what I was anticipating. What I could do is I could do this Dennis Schroeder thing, right? It's not as brutal of a correlation issue as it was with Danilo, because Schroeder is more of a point guard. But is he really going to be closing this game? Does it matter? I don't know. But that's definitely one way I could go. Now, if I did go that way, I wonder who I could put in as a power forward that makes sense from a value perspective. Like, I would have to find someone around 6,000. As a matter of fact, I mean, this is pretty brutal, but I mean, if you want to do this, like they say, don't try this at home. But Eric Pascal is actually projected as a pretty good value. So if you want to do this, you could make this game stack with Oklahoma City and Golden State, and you could be having a lot of fun at 12:30 p.m., 12:45 a.m. when everybody else has put their scores up on the board. Everybody's put their Hassan Whiteside up there. Everybody's put their Jimmy Butler score up there. Everybody's put their Malcolm Brogdon score up there. Maybe not so much on this site. And you could have this late game hammer, call it what it is, with all these dudes that all project well, that really have a chance to win, right? The other thing you could do, and so far I'm just kind of thinking about this, if you didn't want to go hold on, let's put Shea back in there for a minute. And this is the thing I looked at before. If you didn't want to go the ultimate stack route and go Schroeder and Pascal, another thing you could do is you go back to shooting guard, and there's another really good value that kind of pops up, and that is everybody's most hated man in America right now, Langston Galloway. And again, he has failed for DFS players quite often, and maybe he won't be as highly owned this time. So he's a guy that kind of is a really good value that fits in, and what that allows you to do, and this is the way I think about this stuff, is I'm like scrolling and looking at my power forwards on the other side and saying, boy, I wonder if there's somehow somebody from like Orlando or Detroit that kind of fit. Ooh, look at that. Boom. You could get a Blake Griffin lineup, a Blake Griffin correlation with Langston Galloway, okay, in this lineup. Now, you don't have a bring back or whatever, but that is another way that you can do this without overstacking, I guess, that Golden State game. So this is what I want to do. Check this out. So what I did was I made lineups with the other one before. So I want to do something different. 1 second. Right. So this is what I did before. What I do is I put in this one lineup in all of these entries. So this is what I was going to play tonight. I was going to play 2 entries in the slam, and then 1 in the single entry, and then a bunch in the lottery, which is the 777. So what I do is I start with this one lineup, and then I just see if I could deviate from that. So one thing I would probably do before I even forget is I would see, it's easier to do this on DraftKings, but on FanDuel, I mean, I could do a CSV edit and just go half and half. But what I can do is, let's check this out. So let's take this one of these 55s. As a matter of fact, let's do something different. What we're going to do is we're just going to use this in a 777, in a 77, because we're going to take the other 55 and do a completely different build. I think FanDuel is being especially slow because of the video, but so what I'll do is in this lineup, I will swap out Galloway and Blake, and this one will do the ultra stack lineup. We'll put in who is it? Was it going to be Schroeder and Pascal, right? Schroeder and Pascal. All right. So what this does is now we're going to give me this kind of Golden State OKC build, and what I'll then do is that I diversify all these lineups with other kind of one-offs or other kind of correlated plays. But what I want to do for, I guess, my second build is do something completely different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up that 55 again, because that's going to be one of my kind of core ideas. And let's presume that we don't want to do this whole thing with Omari Spellman and Steven Adams, because you'll see remember what we did is, because we made the decision to make this Steven Adams build, that's why this all thing kind of came into play. So instead of doing that, let's clear the deck of these shooting guards again, clear the deck of Giannis, clear the deck of Alex Burks. Okay, let's clear the deck of Spellman just for the hell of it. Let's presume that this Spellman thing was an aberration. He's not even going to show up as a good value. Okay, what's another guy that I want to kind of start with to make some kind of stand to make the rest of this work? I mean, I certainly could put in Giannis, but he's not much of a correlated guy to kind of start with. I was going to put in Whiteside as a center, but I don't see anything really on the other side it's thrilling, so I'm not even going to go with that. And if I go with Podol, I mean, that's just kind of a one-off that's really not going to help me that much. Why don't we do this? How about we go another route? How about we start with this Atlanta pick, okay? And let's see if we can make a correlated lineup with the Atlanta game, okay, and use good plays to kind of work around it. So Trey, we already agreed, again, whether I'm right or wrong, we already agreed that Trey is a pretty good play. What else that could be a good play kind of comes from this game? Karl Anthony Towns is not projected to be that great of a play tonight, but he's close enough to guys like Andre Drummond with respect to to value, that for this purpose, for correlating lineups, I think it's worth taking that little hit in value to get that correlation. Okay. Now, what else can you do in this game? Okay, if you want to make this kind of your game stack type game. Remember, we started with Trey, so when you go with Trey, we're going to go with Karl Anthony Towns for this build. So who else do we want from this game that looks decent? Well, there are two guys that pop as decent plays. From the Minnesota side, the guy that's going to come out is someone who's been affectionately known as Point Wiggins nowadays. Okay, he's had the ball in his hands quite a bit, and although Teague has been back, he hasn't really been the point guard, if you want to know the truth. I mean, he's just kind of, I don't want to say useless, but Wiggins had the ball in his hands quite a bit. So, we could pair Wiggins with Towns in hope that this game just kind of goes off. Now, the problem is going to be what to do on this Atlanta side, but it really isn't that big of a problem because, again, if we're going to go this route, we're going to take the guys with the usage and take the guys who can have the ball in their hands and really just go for this thing. The guy that I would want to have in my lineup is going to be, from the Atlanta side, Jabari Parker. Okay, he's just that guy that's always has a lot of volatility one way or the other, and he's just going to be someone I'm going to want in a game stack like this. So when we start with this, then one thing that I can promise you is that you're not going to be able to play Giannis at all. Okay, you already have only 4680 left. But what you can do is go back to some of these value guys and just start plugging them in and seeing if this kind of works for you. So like the first guy that we took out for the time being we could put back in is Brad Wanamaker. Okay. And the other guy you could put in, and the other guy you could put back in is going to be Langston Galloway again, right? Now again, it's not as nice to have because you don't have the same, great correlation with Blake Griffin. Although I wouldn't say that's a tremendous correlation, but at least you're in the same game. So with 5,000 left, you could probably do something decent with small forward. Let's take a look and see what we have here. Well, once again, we could just go back to Alex Burks if we want. He's only 5,900. In the power forward position, I'm just kind of looking again. We could go back to Spellman. I mean, if we really get lucky and this Spellman is really a good play, I mean, that makes everything just so easy, okay? But you'd have to think that one of these Golden State guys is going to be pretty decent. But let's see if we can get greedy. Let's see if we don't have to use Omari Spellman. Let's say that we have to pick other people from this game. Okay, let's say that we have to go back to Alex Burks. Now, if we go back to Alex Burks, again, we're going to have to find somebody a little cheap because we're not going to be able to get Spellman in this build just because we decided we weren't going to play him, right? But again, you could still do some funny stuff from that Golden State game and go back to some more of this value, and you can get Glenn Robinson in. So you get Glenn Robinson and Alex Burks. And then with any luck, if you look through the 4600s on in FanDuel, you'll be able to find someone that you can kind of plug in here. Okay. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like we're going to be able to do that. So it doesn't look like you're going to be able to do that. So what can you do here? Well, what you can do is go back into small forward and see if there's anybody in small forward that projects to be decent that fits some of these other guys. And one guy that I'm looking at, let's take a look and see if this plays. You could play Cam Reddish if you want. Now, we got to obviously take a look at the injury, and we got to keep an eye on that. And if he's starting, I mean, let's go, right? And then with 5,200 left, you go back to power forward. And again, as long as your guy is, close to some of these other guys, again, if Spellman's a value, if he's actually, going to be playing 20, 25 minutes, then all bets are off. We're just throwing him in. But what you could do is put in, I don't know, you could put in, I'm just throwing names out there that project okay. You know what you could do? You could try Marquise Chris. Like if you're not going to be playing Spielman, okay, or Spellman, you could try Marquise Chris if you want. And then we're still getting some of this Golden State game. Okay. So we could save these types of changes there. So the reason why I went through all this is, again, I did my research already, and I knew what kind of value there is out there. But then what I like to do, and again, this is only if you're going to hand build. I'm only playing 20 lineups here, so I can get away with hand building. So what I'll end up doing is I will end up then using the rest of these 777s or these 77s to deviate from all these guys that I have at 100% and just find other guys that kind of filter in there. But what I've done is I've taken what could have been otherwise really, really chalky plays and made a couple of kind of key decisions, and then just started, letting kind of the lineups build themselves, knowing that maybe I'm not making the greatest projected play at every individual position, but given the fact that I want them to correlate well with one another, I'm willing to sacrifice a little of that to get that better correlation. What I'm going to do, I'm going to pause for just a second, and then we're going to pull up DraftKings. All right, so when it comes to DraftKings for tonight, it's completely different. Okay, the reason I mention that is there are two plays in DraftKings and kind of one game that are just kind of have to be played, sort of. But we still are going to be able to do a similar type process. So I think the two guys that are showing up as close to locks as possible on DraftKings are going to be Malcolm Brogdon and Hassan Whiteside. You could argue that Jason Tatum is pretty close. And actually, I guess Wanamaker again, but Trae Young is probably pretty good also. But Brogdon and Whiteside are definitely the two guys that are, number one, going to be incredible values, and number two, going to be like really, really highly owned, right? So when you're building GPP lineups, the way I'm going to approach this slate, and these are just kind of like good plays I put in, right? These are all going to be highly owned dudes. Maybe Blake won't be that highly owned, but all these guys will be really highly owned. This is probably I don't even know what good cash game lineups would look like, but I would imagine because all these guys are really popular, that they'd probably be a good cash game lineup. So I mean, if you want to put this in, go ahead. But um, what I'm gonna do with DraftKings is this. You see, I entered 20 lineups, right? So what I did was I entered the two lineups or the same lineup in twice in this 50 in this is the 55. This is the most expensive one. Also, I entered it in two single entries and 16 times in the lottery, right? The excellent eights. So what I'm going to do is I want to create different builds based on how often I'm using Brogdon and Whiteside, okay? Just to kind of show you the way I think about this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do one build when I use both Brogdon and Whiteside, with the idea being, okay, if I'm going to use the two chalkiest plays on the slate, I want to use the rest of the lineup to build at least some degree of differentiation and some degree of correlation, depending on which contest I'm entering, right? Like if I'm going to put an entry with both Hassan Whiteside and Brogdon into the excellent eights, which you need to beat billions of people, then you got to really have to go off the board. Right? I don't want to say that far off the board. I mean, obviously you can get there with these two guys, but I want to be more highly correlated and less owned in a tournament like that. I still will play a couple of lineups with both of them in there, but again, the rest of the lineups have to be a little bit different. When it comes to the bigger one, now again, I know this isn't the way you're supposed to think about it, but as I do think that even this $55 tournament, you still have to beat like a lot of people, and the competition's a little more fierce. So I probably am going to have to differentiate a decent amount in that one also. The ones I won't be as off the wall with are going to be the two single entries. Now, with that said, in the single entry tournaments, these guys are going to be really, really chalky, okay? But you also don't need that big of a score to win those. So I don't have to fade them in those tournaments. So I guess the first build that I want to try to accomplish is I guess ones with both of them in it, right? So let's keep these guys in, Brogdon and Whiteside, and let's see if we can't build other lineups, other combinations around this. And what we're going to use is this is when we're going to go through kind of game by game to kind of see if I like anybody from these other games for the purpose of correlating with these guys. So, like for example, the Memphis-Indiana game, unfortunately, if I want to play Brogdon with someone from the other side, I just don't like anybody. I just don't. I don't think anybody from Memphis is a good value on the other side. So I'm not going to play anybody from there just for the purpose of correlation, unless I thought they were close to a decent value. The guys from Indiana, you know, Sabonis is showing up as a good play, but I worry about this a little bit. Okay, now I don't want to talk too much about Brogdon, but look, they screwed up. They made him only 6,000. He should be 8,000, whatever it is. I mean, I will say that Brogdon, this is not the same situation as when he was smashing before. I mean, I don't even know if there was a single game where he had all these guys in the game with him. So it's possible that his usage is not even remotely close to what it was before he got injured. But 6,000 is kind of rough. But I'm not saying he's completely unfadeable in this spot. Sabonis, he's fine. You know, he's someone I could certainly look to correlate a little bit. So let's put him in just for now. I mean, I don't think we're going to be able to do it because I just don't think he's first of all, I don't think he's low owned enough to make this work. I don't think its correlation is that great. So we'll put him in for now. And the problem is there's no game stack possibility. He's really not going to make it. The next game, though, the Minnesota, well, actually, I'm looking for first the Orlando-Detroit game. I have it in a different order. Sorry, on my computer over here. So in the Orlando-Detroit game, this is a really tough situation because Orlando is missing Vooch and Gordon, and yet no one looks like a good play. I mean, everybody lost all their money with Ken Burch this weekend, and you know doesn't look that great here either. Fournier would be my best, but I'm in no great hurry to play this game. I have no, unless there were a big correlation I could get on both sides, I really wouldn't play it. Andre and Blake look pretty good on Detroit side, but again, unless there was someone from the Orlando side to run it with those guys, I think I'm probably better off elsewhere. I mean, they don't look that great that I just need to jam them in. And on DraftKings, Langston Galloway is okay, but not quite as good as he would be on FanDuel. Brooklyn, Cleveland. I have no problem going to this game, maybe as a possibility. The issue is going to be the news on Kevin Love, if he plays or not. If he doesn't play, we can go right back to Tristan Thompson or Larry Nance or even Clarkston or Chetty Osman, even at 4,600. That could be something I could look at, okay? Like if I wanted to play guys from Brooklyn with somebody ridiculous like Chetty Osman, that's kind of a ridiculous play that I actually might make. So I would go someone like who on the net side, like the normal guys. I would go back with Spencer Dinwiddie maybe, right? Maybe with Spencer Dinwiddie, and then maybe bring it back with Osman. That is definitely a possibility, but we'll kind of get back to it. I have to say, I don't know. We'll see what happens. Philadelphia, Toronto. Again, we're looking for plays that correlate with our main Brogdon or Whiteside or in a game by themselves. Philadelphia, Toronto. Nothing really too exciting about this game. You could play Embiid, you could play Siakam, but it's not that big a deal. And it just doesn't look like a game stack type of situation. Charlotte, Miami. You saw that we had Jimmy Butler here as grading out as a really good play. And this is something to actually look at. I mean, Charlotte plays no defense at all. It's going to be a good spot for him, for Butler. What you could do is you could play Bam Adebayo along with Butler in this game, right? So if you wanted to do that, you could play Bam. And then what you'd have to do, you wouldn't have to, but it would be nice if we brought it back with somebody from Charlotte. They just all look just so brutal. I mean, Miami plays some defense. And what are you going to play, Rozier at 6,200? Or Graham at 7,000? I don't know, maybe. I don't know, maybe. This is looking very, very difficult. We'll get back to it, I guess. All right, so Sacramento at Boston. So Boston is emerging as a really, really good value on this slate. And the reason why is Kemba Walker is out. So all these guys like Wanamaker and Tatum and Jaylen Brown and guys like that, they are very, very strong values. So why don't we try that? Why don't we keep Wanamaker, keep Tatum? Let's throw in, just for the hell of it, Jaylen Brown also. And let's see if we can bring it back with someone from Sacramento. And this is really asking for it, okay? Because you just, it's not like Sacramento last year where you could just, you just knew exactly who was closing and who the man was. But what I would do if I were going to bring someone back from this game, I would go with absolute, like, max volatility. And for me, max volatility would probably be Buddy Hield. Okay, he has really been killing people, but he still loves to shoot. He's still Buddy Hield, and he's still capable of 50-point games. So he would be the guy I would run it back with. So we'd have to find a way to kind of put him into this lineup here. So he's not power forward eligible, but what we could do is we could put Tatum in the power forward spot, right? So we put Tatum in the power forward spot, and then we could put Hield in the regular forward spot, or even the guard spot, depending on what else looks like. So you're looking at this, and you've got a Boston. Now, is there another Sacramento guy that you could throw in? Boy, oh boy. You want to do this? I mean, if you did this, if you put in Bielitsa and Buddy Hield and got away with it, I mean, you could be a real psycho, couldn't you? But, I mean, if you're going to play Brogdon and Whiteside, and then you're also going to play, by the way, Wanamaker, who's going to be chalky, and maybe Tatum's going to be chalky, you're going to have to do something, right? So maybe some craziness like Hield Bielitsa and a big Boston-Sacramento game stack in a ridiculously low total might be what you need to do to get to differentiation, especially in like the $8 tournament. So let's move on. Let's see if we can't come up with something better. It's got to be something better than this, right? So let's go ahead back to our old Minnesota-Atlanta game. Let's see how these guys grade out on DraftKings. It's the same type of deal, right? It's Cat, it's Wiggins. I'm just not into Teague in this particular spot, although he's certainly fine. And then on the other side, again, it would be Young and Parker. But I don't know if you can get away with that. I don't know if you can get away with that, but let's just see. Let's clear the deck of this Boston-Sacramento garbage, right? Okay. And let's see what it looks like if you do something. There's no way you get all these guys in, but let's try it. If you put in Trey and Cat, well, you'd have to get rid of Bam, right? You have to play Cat, Trey, and who do we say we need? Do we need Wiggins? What is he, a small forward? Small forward. Wiggins. See, now we're out of money. See, that's what happens. Even if you just play Whiteside, Trey and Towns, putting a lot of pressure on yourself to find good value. So I don't think that's going to work. All right, sorry. So I had to put this one back on there. You know what I'm going to do? Let me assign this so that I don't lose this. So I don't lose this lineup here. It's just such a genius lineup. So moving ahead, I guess, to the next game, to see if we can't improve on this, is this Utah-Milwaukee game. Now you'll notice in none of these bills did we even put Giannis in here. And he is rating as one of the best values on the slate as far as raw points and as far as everything goes. So it's certainly worth attempting to do something with him, okay? But the problem is that unless we find another game that correlates really, really well, which is possible, there's really nothing else I like from this in this game. In other words, you don't have to look. Giannis self-correlates. In other words, he doesn't need anybody else on his team to go off for you to be able to play Giannis, okay? But just to look, I mean, Bledsoe looks fine. On the other side is something to look for because on the Utah side, there's rumors that Gobert is out. I mean, if Gobert is out, then all kinds of stuff's going to open up. But we're going to presume Gobert's in. So if Gobert's in, I mean, you could play Donovan Mitchell if you want. But aside from that, I don't know. I don't know what else. How else I'm going to get Giannis in here? And certainly you don't have to play Bam. Let's try it. I mean, it seems as though if you're going to want to play Giannis, then we're going to have to go back to this Golden State business, right? And, we were going to get to that game a little bit later, but I think it's kind of time that we have to get to it now, right? If we're trying to think of putting Giannis in here, then we got to look. And boy, it doesn't look like anybody's that great. But on DraftKings, the guys that are showing up as good values are actually not exactly the same guys on FanDuel. So Willie Cauley-Stein is showing up as a really good value at 4,600. Spielman, not as much, but he actually looks okay. Pascal is 5,900, but again, I mean, we only need 5,600 per player, right? So we could put him in here, and we could certainly find. Oh, I see what's going to happen again. Oh my God, it looks. You know what it looks like? It looks like I'm going to be up late. That's what's going to happen. It looks like we're going to be up late again, because it looks like, again, this deal with these Golden State and Oklahoma City guys is going to be something to consider. Oh my God, and look at this. You could do this too. Wait. Yeah, so there it is again. You could go with this OKC stuff with Schroeder and Gallinari, back with Cauley-Stein and Pascal, and then you could be able to get all these guys you want. Then you could be able to get Giannis. Yep. I mean, that is certainly something I'm going to do. So what I want to do then is I'm going to actually make that whole deal kind of like a core. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this again. Sorry. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back in here, and we're going to create a whole new core out of this. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn this lineup into a main entry, like into that 50K for first one. We're going to make this into one of the single entries, and we're going to take half of the 8s, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 of these. Okay? And you're going to see why I do that in a second. All right, now what I'd like to do is, again, find another type of core that's better than that Sacramento business. But let's just see. Maybe that Sacramento business is the next best thing. All right, going to Portland, Chicago, which would be very nice and helpful because it has the Hassan Whiteside in it. I mean, maybe we're just getting too cute, right? Maybe if you're going to play Whiteside, why don't we just go ahead? I don't know if you can get away with this, but boy, wouldn't it be nice to be able to play Lillard? I don't know if you can get away with this, but so you play Whiteside and Lillard on the same side. On the other side, in the Chicago side, you play Zach LaVine because he always has the ceiling. Now, I'm warning you, he's not projected all that great, okay? But these are the guys who are going to be in at the end of the game. These are the overtime guys, and there's going to be a lot of shooting going on. So I could actually put all these guys in. All these guys are kind of grading out okay. I'm not saying they're great, okay, but they're okay. We look at LaVine, got to put him over here. Now, there's no way this is going to all fit perfectly, but it's probably a good thing that it doesn't. We could put Wendell Carter Jr. over here, right? What does Tatum look like? What is his position? Small. We're going to put him as a small forward. Okay. And then what we're going to do is, let's see what happens if we put in Markkanen. So we're going to be short 1,700, right? And we just have to find a $5,200 small forward, throughout their entire player pool. And we don't even need to because we could fiddle around and put Markkanen in there if we have to, I think. But it would be nice and, oh, there it is. I found a one-off. Let me see if I can find a correlation. Ooh. Ooh, okay, so there are two choices here. There are three choices. We could either do, now this is a little bit frisky. We could either go Carmelo and go for triple Portland. We could go TJ Warren and go for double Indiana. Or we could go kind of boring, not boring, but just standalone Torrey and Prince. Well, the good thing about it is that we don't have to only do one of them. We could do all three if we feel like it. Now, that's not exactly the most diverse lineup in the world, okay? Diverse build in the world, but just to show you, I definitely think this is better than the Sacramento business. Although maybe we'll do one or two of the Sacramento businesses. So let's put these in the rest of these lineups here. Let's put them in all. Why not? Actually, let's leave one so that we have a framework again. Actually, yeah. Okay. And what we could do is when we go through these and differentiate, we'll replace Prince with those other guys that kind of, fill in the correlation a little bit better. All right. So what we've been doing, by the way, is only one set. We've been doing the lineups that have both Brogdon and Whiteside in, and it looks like we're able to get away with it. I mean, we're able to play some kind of weirdo lineups without, without having to toss these two really, really good plays. Now, I am going to make some lineups without one of these guys in them, but that's when we kind of start filtering down. And depending on how long this goes, we'll see if we have time for that. All right, so what I want to do then is let's see if there's another way that we could build a better core than what we've done, right? That Sacramento nonsense is still in the offing as kind of a secondary core, but all right, let's look at LA, San Antonio. The good thing is again, check. You have Davis and LeBron playing. Do you need them both? Can you play them both? Do you play just one? If so, which one? Or do you play neither? It's always a decision on every slate where you have Davis and LeBron and Harden and Westbrook. I don't think I'm going to play either tonight, so I don't think I want to spend any time on this game. I don't like anybody on San Antonio at all, and I don't like Pirtle on DraftKings. And the last game is, again, going to be that game. It's going to be the Golden State game, which it looks like it's going to be a major part of what we're doing here, right? You have these values on the OKC side, and you also have these values on the Golden State side if you could figure out what they are, right? So what I would do, again, is let's go back and let's see what this thing looked like. Actually, this one just had Schroeder. This was more to make sure we got Giannis in there, okay? So I think that it's safe to say that this could be our Golden State core. In other words, we are going to go back in and get some more of these Golden State and OKC pieces within this build. Like, for example, we definitely want to get some Shea in here, right? We definitely want to get, we have Gallinari in our main piece. We definitely want to get some, do we need some Chris Paul? We probably should throw in some Chris Paul in here. We might want to throw in a share or two of Steven Adams in here, right? So we are going to have to shuffle around these Golden State guys within here. And on the, these Oklahoma City guys. And on the Golden State side, we already have Stein in here, right? And we have, who do you have, Pascal? But we're all going to have to throw in those other guys like Alex Burks, Omari Spellman, again, if in fact he has those types of minutes projections. So I think that we're good as far as our cores go, right? I do. Where's the Sacramento thing? Just in case, I'm going to have some of this. Okay. So what I think I want to do, how many lineups do I want to have? So I have 18, 19, 20. 20 lineups total. How many lineups of the 20 do I want to have the Sacramento-Boston nonsense? Do I want a second one? You know what? Let's do one more lineup. Just one more lineup with this one. And we're only going to do this in the 8-8 because I think we do have room for one more entry there. Yeah, we only entered 18 times, so we did have room for 2 more anyway. So let's put 2 of these in this, and that's the only thing we're going to enter this one in because this is not enough. Not enough funds. Oh, because I tried to enter the 555. Aha. I wonder. Okay. So we really don't have time to go through all of this. Okay. It's been already an hour, and Bobby will murder me if I go longer than this. But what I would do is I would then go in to these cores and kind of just swap around and mix and match and maybe take out, move different combinations of these Golden State guys in here. Maybe take Markkanen out of one. Maybe take Carter out of one. And we definitely would want to be shuffling Prince in and out with those other 3 value guys. Those other 3 5,100 guys. The Warren, who correlated with Brogdon. I even forgot who the other guy was. But I'll remember when I go in there. And then I'll just, hit enter and let it roll. Now, obviously, we have to wait until a few minutes before lock to see if there are any changes. Hope nothing changes after you go out to dinner, because then you have to come back and change everything again, and then your wife yells at you, and then it's a whole other story. But hopefully this wasn't too off the wall, and hopefully it actually saves, and hopefully I didn't just do this for nothing. But it's about all I have. Hopefully that we win something tonight, and